Assessing the Image, Creative Practice in an Online Learning Environment, presented by Dr. Anna Nazari, Gina Shinani and Moira Doropoulos. For over 20 years and in various incarnations, academics at Curtin University in Perth, Western Australia, have been teaching a BA Fine Art and Visual Culture degree online. Although online art education is far from a new venture, the question, how do you assess art online, still persists. The question of whether or not art can be assessed through digital interfaces stems from a delay in acknowledging that digital technologies help generate learning experiences that are different to traditional art education. Issues of conflict arise from the belief that the assessment of an artwork should involve a direct encounter with an artwork, that the digital image is not a trustworthy measure of evaluating some forms of art, and that the layout of images within the digital space allegedly creates prescriptive art outcomes. In an online space, the digital image is the principal communicator of all accessible visual inquiry. Assessing a work of art in a digital space thus requires recognition that the artwork is not independent of its digital mode of delivery, but rather needs to operate within it in order to shift and enhance how we see, experience, and contextualize art. Late 20th century technological advances provided the momentum for the materialization of online education. With the invention of the internet and the World Wide Web, individuals could now inexpensively manage, provide, source, and use information for themselves or share with anyone from all over the world. This unprecedented treatment of and access to information sparked a whole new way of learning which facilitated the birth of the online e-learner, a person learning via electronic study materials, tutor and peer discussion boards, websites, email and digital and audio interfaces. For Curtin University, online education is practical, flexible and offers unparalleled learning opportunities for distant learners in Australia and overseas. The BA Fine Art and Visual Culture degree is offered via Open Universities Australia, but is taught and managed by Curtin academic staff and is equivalent to the on-campus course. In other words, students studying online must meet the same learning requirements to receive the same degree on completion and graduation. Students can choose from a range of visual culture, visual studio workshop and visual arts research units. Often it is the traditional fields of art such as printmaking, drawing, textiles, painting and sculpture, as well as the art project units, which involve self-directed study, that provoke the most speculation in regard to online assessment. Assessments require all students to submit a folio of work, and depending on the student's level of study, the folio may include a series of completed tasks or a series of outcomes based on a proposed area of investigation. All folios need to contain evidence of visual diary work, including idea development, artist and other research, material and process exploration, and any unresolved outcomes. All visual data is expressed via digital images, which typically consists of scanned material such as visual diary pages, photographic documentation of outcomes and explorations, digitally generated artworks, as well as images sourced from the internet, such as artist or other research. Unlike images viewed in a non-digital space, the digital image is an electronic abstraction of visual information that has been photographed or scanned and can only manifest in a digital space. When assessing submissions, the computer acts as a digital depot in which digital technologies merge to make the interaction with digital images possible. The assessment platforms for most works is therefore subject to the dimensions of a computer screen. Speculation arises from a belief that it must be impossible to adequately assess an artwork in a digital space if one cannot fully experience the artwork. The digital image is often considered as documentation only, a view which reinforces the depot as a technological barrier that immobilises a person's direct assessment of an artwork. It also signals a delay in recognising that there are differences between the assessments of on-campus and online artworks, and that these differences are not necessarily inferior, they're just alternative ways of experiencing art and making meaning. The idea that an assessment of an artwork should involve a physical encounter with an artwork can be linked to aesthetic theories that focus on the appreciation of beauty and good taste, a distinction clearly discernible in the aesthetic theory described by Immanuel Kant in the Critique of Judgment. Kant focused on the 18th century faculty of psychology, which rigorously differentiated cognitive from non-cognitive mental acts, a view which meant he failed to consider imagination and feeling as intelligible part of some artwork's meaning and comprehension. His most reductive view stipulated that the detection of beauty necessitated a type of disinterested judgment capable of shelving one's practical, political and ethical beliefs. This idea persisted well into 20th century aesthetic discourse through the belief that it was an essential condition for a genuine aesthetic study of art, as reflected in this quote from Frank Sibley. Aesthetic judgment, which relies solely on the faculty of sensational feeling, is not congruent with Curtin University's assessment ethos, largely because it does not recognise the digital space as capable of eliciting an aesthetic encounter. In The Border of Aesthetic, Robert Gero suggests any property of an artwork counts as an aesthetic if its virtual viewing is sufficient to generate non-inferential judgments. If thoughts can generate intuitive or visceral responses, it would be nonsensical to suggest that this experience is absent from a digital viewing platform. Even with the limitations of a computer screen, one can still see, hear, or have an emotional response to a digital image of an artwork, or even a digital image that is only describing ideas and practical development. Gero suggests that a work assessed solely via sensory or felt-based responses would only permit subjective assessments defined by one person's tastes. If aesthetics play a role in the assessment of digital images, it occurs as part of a greater dialogue that positions an aesthetic encounter as not only informed by what one sees, hears, or feels, but also governed by other meanings and contexts, such as details about art history, art theory, and art practice. Assessing the authenticity and value of information communicated in digital images is another area of concern. The doubts surrounding the accuracy of data conveyed in digital images is compounded by a lag in grasping how new technologies have spawned a digital visual literacy that endorses different ways of viewing, analysing, and perceiving art. Before enrolling in an online course, most students have actively been living with and absorbing images through exposure to social media, websites, and blogs. Being literate in this field of study requires students to gain knowledge and experience with the tools of their discipline. The e-learner is not only a consumer of visual literacy, but also a producer. As a consumer and a producer, the student needs to be able to use a computer to generate effective visual communications, critically evaluate and creatively respond to learning materials, make decisions based on their research, ideas, and creative explorations, capture or store all of their production, both developmental and resolved, via digital images, and present this information in a communicable format. Often it is the communication of producibility in the digital image that raises the most speculation in regard to assessment. This occurs because there is a general perception that it is impossible to fairly assess an artwork when the digital image can easily be altered to create inauthentic versions of creative practice. In Digital and Other Virtualities, Renegotiating the Image, Anthony Bryant and Griselda Pollock suggest that a distrust of digital images as artworks or conveyors of meaningful data stems from an inability to forensically navigate the digital image in the same way as past photographic or analogue images. The forensic navigation of analogue images is assumed to be more authentic due to its contained evidence of indexicality. Indexicality refers to those media, such as film or photography, in which the production of signs involves traces of the real objects they represent, as Barth's quote indicates. By contrast, the digital image is an arrangement of numbers in binary sets, which means numbers rather than light-sensitive materials are the key intervening materiality. There is also a belief that digital images do not have clear associations with another aspect of indexicality, deixis. Deixis refers to a here and nowness or a there and thenness connected to perception, experience, and knowledge of certain events in time and space within the photograph. One of the major points of contention arises from the fact that digital images are composed of numbers and not physical substances, which means that with the simple aid of a computer software program, they can be altered to make endless image configurations. Speculation regarding authenticity usually centres on the truthfulness of what is actually being assessed, if, after the work is documented, there is a perception it can be altered. In other words, can I trust what I'm seeing is the actual artwork? This questions the authenticity of the artwork and creator by querying if the work is a documentation of an actual event or an actual artwork, if the image belongs to a real time and space, if it is a legitimate act of doing, or if a sense of here and nowness, in direct reference to what is being captured at a specific time and space, is believable. Making meaning in online learning is not limited to the documentation of a physical outcome though, such as a painting or a sculpture, but can continue in the construction or presentation of the digital image. After the initial documentation, a digital image may have undergone several graphic enhancement processes. Its brightness, intensity, colour and contrast may have changed, new layers may have been added and so forth. The reality that an assessor is rarely ever likely to see an artwork in the flesh should not be viewed as a negative. The technologies enriching the extension of the digital image give students an opportunity to explore the boundaries between the documentation and/or enhancement of documentation as part of the artwork itself. The digital image is not just a tool for documentation or delivery, but also a medium for exploration and extension of art practice, and needs to be viewed holistically in this environment. Questions of authenticity may also be raised in the digital image in relationship to who is the author of the artwork. In an online setting, an artwork that has been digitally generated may be constructed from a wide range of source material that is not necessarily photographed by the student. In an online setting, authenticity is garnered through evidence of meaning and context. In Making Art, Form and Meaning, Terry Barrett notes, meaning is an elusive term, but it generally refers to what an artwork is about or what it expresses. He asserts that the meaning of an artwork is always contingent on context, the conditions and circumstances which structure its setting. Extrapolating meaning and context from an artwork is a good way of determining clarity, originality, and inventiveness, all of which help verify the authenticity of the creator and the artwork in an online setting. Authenticity in relationship to meaning and context is also determined through substantiation of doing and thinking. In an online submission, digital images must show evidence of a student's brainstorming, experimentation, reflection, development, extension, and resolution of creative practice. Generally speaking, it is only if this information is absent from a submission or does not clearly relate to the information communicated in a digital image that questions of authorship will be raised. Another concern often raised is that the layout of assessment creates a formulaic narrative that allows no room for ambiguity in its disclosure of development and outcomes. It is fair to say that an idea of narrative penetrates art online learning in a more literal sense than traditional face-to-face teaching. In most on-campus assessment reviews, for example, assessors will view an artwork set up in a specific location, and in the near vicinity will be some additional support material accompanying the main artwork, such as research, visual diary, material tests, and so forth. Usually there is no specific ordering or arranging of this information, and although an assessor may sift through this material to determine or discover the origins and development of the work, generally though, the final artwork is the central focus. By contrast, the arrangement of ordering of information in a digital submission is typically laid out in a linear fashion from start to finish. Digital images are inserted into a digital PowerPoint presentation sequentially, which means the distinction between preliminary development and final outcomes may be little more than a titled slide. This mode of presentation instantly creates a visual narrative which encompasses a series of short tales plotting the beginning, middle, and end of set exercises, or a longer allegory highlighting the inventions and discoveries of a self-directed project. It is important to note, though, that the storytelling aspect of art online learning does not diminish the meaning of an artwork or artworks, but rather coincides with the technology of the day and enriches meaning through an alternative means of communication. Often the differences between art online learning and traditional learning are dramatised as a conflict in which one is pitted as better or worse. The rationale of the either-or approach is notably flawed because digital technologies help generate learning experiences that are different but not second-rate to traditional art education. In specifying this distinction, the following points have been established. The digital space may not enable a direct encounter with an artwork, but this does not mean that an aesthetic experience is absent. The digital image may not be able to be forensically navigated in the same way as an artwork or a photograph, but this does not mean that the authenticity of the artwork or its author is impossible to verify. And the presentation of digital images may replicate a narrative, but again, this does not mean that the narrative diminishes the credibility of the artwork. When contemplating the question, how do you assess an artwork online, the answer must consider that online learning reflects the current technological advances and changing literacy of contemporary culture, and acknowledge that an evaluation of an artwork can never be independent of its digital mode of delivery.